I was the designer for the World of Warcraft raid boss, Patchwerk in Naxxramas.
You should watch some of this guy's shorts because he talks about the design of like vanilla WoW fights. This one's how he designed Patchwerk. So those of you guys who don't know how Patchwerk works, Patchwerk is very much seen as a stand there and do as much damage as you can fight in classic WoW. Patchwerk is it's part of Naxxramas, the first boss in the construct wing. It's very much seen as very tank and spank because most of the work that has to be done is done by the tanks and the healers, really, because everybody just sits in this river that makes them go low health, which changes how the mechanics work for the Hateful Strike. So a Hateful Strike is whenever a boss is fighting one guy, he's fighting the tank, he's hitting the tank, but a Hateful is like somebody who's like second on threat or second in whatever, you go and hit that guy. It's just like a bonus attack that hits another person that's not the main tank. That's what a Hateful is. You see a lot of Hateful Strikes in Burning Crusade actually, but Patchwerk has a Hateful here. It's oftentimes seen as like the tang and spank maximum amount of DPS that a class can do is always done on the Patchwerk fight. They go full world buffs, they do whatever, and they say like Patchwerk DPS is like the phrase that was used. I don't know if people even still use that phrase as much anymore, but that's like how that fight works. So this is the guy who he has a phone and also he designed the Patchwerk fight. So let's see.
I was the designer for the World of Warcraft raid boss, Patchwerk in Naxxramas. Let me tell you how he was designed. Jeff Kaplan was reminiscing on an EverQuest boss called the Avatar of War. As Jeff remembered it, this boss wasn't too fancy, it just hit you really hard. Tanks tanking, healers healing, DPS doing their thing. All of the difficulty and excitement of the Avatar of War was based on how tightly it was tuned. And he had a theory that a boss like that in World of Warcraft could be really exciting too, so I got to work. The first problem we had was that tanks back then had a little over 4,000 health, but even if Patchwerk was hitting for 4,000 on every hit, healers had no problem keeping up. Raid groups regularly had 2 to 4 tanks, so I had Patchwerk rotate his hits between a tank and multiple off tanks. That's where we ran into the second problem. Simply spamming
So he's talking about that Hateful Strike mechanic.
heal spells onto dedicated targets for the duration of the fight gets tedious. And so a custom attack prioritization system was devised to allow Patchwerk's auto attacks to land on the primary tank with additional big hits on the off tanks.
Okay, so he's talking about the Hateful Strike. So like the thing is with the Hatefuls here, Patchwerk works a little bit differently than like the entire rest of the game because he does his Hatefuls not only like based on threat, but also the amount of health the target has. So that's why the DPS stand in the river that like poisons them and makes their health really low. So the DPS will always just go run into the river, stand in the river. That way, like the Hateful Strike prioritization, it's not really just about the threat, it's about the amount of health they also have.
I named the ability Hateful Strike as a temporary name because the algorithm chooses amongst the 3 enemies with the most
this guy explains the whole thing.
also known as hate. To be honest, I never expected the name Hateful Strike to ship, but here we are. Hateful Strike targets the off tank with the most health to give healers some extra reaction time if heals were landing at different times due to coordination issues or lag. The third problem we had is that the right answer just became bring 30 healers and just DPS the boss down slowly. That's where the enrage timer came
Enrage
from.
timer, yeah, so you can't do that.
Enrage timers are pretty standard practice in modern World of Warcraft, but Patchwerk was the first time we aggressively used an enrage timer as an explicit DPS check.
I think there's other enrage timers, but you never hit them. Like they're not even remotely close. And Patchwerk nowadays, when you're playing classic WoW, people know so much and they've gotten so good at the game that it's not as much of an issue now. But if you saw, or if you remember playing like the Burning Crusade pre-patch, you lose a lot of stuff. So running Naxxramas in the Burning Crusade pre-patch is a little bit hard, even harder in some ways. Even though you have like a DPS increase, you lose a lot of the consumables and the extra stuff that you need to do Naxx. Part of the problem with Naxx in general, and really one of the difficulties of classic WoW, like especially at the highest level of classic WoW, is it costs a lot of gold. You need consumables. You need to consume a bunch of stuff. You need to get your world buffs. Playing the game, it's not limited to what your character can do or like being competitive at the game, right? Competitive, not like on a ELO level, but more so on the level of like playing the game at a high level. It's more like a knowledge gap, but a lot of people have that knowledge these days, so.
And this led to the final problem that we had. Back in those days, there just wasn't robust data on how much DPS a player could realistically put out. This was before World of Logs. So we had top players in the company test every single class against target dummies to try and put out as much damage as possible. And then, because we knew that serious raiders always find clever ways to push the game to its limits, we padded Patchwerk's health by an extra 30% just for good measure. Now that we were fully straining tanks, healers, and DPS, Patchwerk was ready to ship.
That's super funny. That's wonderful. Take the top dev's damage and add 30% to it. The game design story behind WoW's Loatheb. Okay.
I designed Loatheb, a Naxxramas raid boss in World of Warcraft.
This guy's good explaining? Yeah. Devs are smart, man. In fact, okay, so I have a take. This is my take, chat. I have a take. Devs are smart. They're smart people. But sometimes, if you're too smart, you can't tune your brain down to the average level, and it makes it really hard to see the perspective of how somebody else who doesn't have the same amount of intelligence or knowledge on a subject that you have, how they'll see it. A lot of devs have like engineering brain. And you know how like, I mean, different people learn differently, different people think differently. There's like engineering brain, I feel like it's like you're a math science guy and you're not a word wizard, right? There's a lot of guys like that who are not particularly word wizards, but they can go and they can map things out that you can't even like begin to imagine. And like, hey, like I understand this, whatever. They're just not good at explaining things. They're not good with their words. Then you have other people who are not that smart, who are word wizards, and they're really charismatic and they have a way of being able to speak and be able to like captivate an audience of people and make people like, even to teach people things, but they themselves might not be that smart, but they can teach really well. Sometimes people are really smart, but they can't teach well.
It all started with a simple question. Could we make a fight where the healers would be called upon to DPS? A naive design would be to just disable healing completely during the fight. Pretty quickly, we realized this wouldn't result in healers DPSing, it would result in them being benched. So the first real attempt was a stacking debuff on the tank. Consecutive heals would reduce healing. The hope was that healers would space their heal.
Dude, I gotta say, so every time on the Loatheb fight, every time you heal, you can't heal again for another minute. Okay, and that's what he's about to explain this, right? But it sounds so simple on paper, but I swear it is like pulling teeth sometimes, trying to get all your healers to press a one heal. You get one heal cast per minute. Press the button one time. Hey, I just healed. So-and-so is next, right? I don't know why it's the hardest thing in the world. Like sometimes somebody would heal and then I just forgot to say anything. I'm like, bro, now there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this fight. But like that's how I like to do it. Just like, hey, you heal and then you call out who's next. And you have an order predetermined. Like you don't have to think, you just have to know who's next. So that person hears their name and they're like, oh, hey. But you get in this like rhythm. It's crazy.
Heals out from one another and then spend their time between heals doing DPS. What actually happened was if the tank was getting low, everybody started panicking and healed harder. People would try to heal through the deep. We got more healing, not less. The next idea was to have a stacking debuff on the caster after every.
Oh, so this is the different things that they did. I was like, wait, there's no debuff. So this is how they got to the final result. Oh, okay.
Heal. Imagine a debuff that could cause diminishing returns on the effectiveness of your heal spells.
That's
your
so
first
interesting.
Heal lands at 100% effectiveness, and then 80%, then 60%, and so on. This turned out to be super unfun. Imagine you're a healer sitting with, say, 3 stacks of the
and you
debuff
burn your
on
mana.
You, so you're at 40% healing effectiveness. The tank needs a heal. What do? Doing nothing feels like a mistake. Casting a heal to save the tank feels like digging a deeper hole for yourself. This is how we got to the hard cap that finally shipped. 1 heal per healer per minute. Raid leaders would want to bring healers for that coveted heal.
Dude,
rather
this
than
is so
being
interesting
benched out.
because he's right.
But once you've cast your heal, you might as well DPS while you're on the healing timeout, right? With the core mechanic in place, the next concern was that with less healing going around, tanks might not get all the rage that they needed to generate enough threat. That's where the spores came from.
So then
Killing
they do more
gives
crits.
players a buff that
You
lets
crit,
them
you
do
do more damage,
damage
you get more
without
rage.
generating any threat. There's no doubt Loatheb requires farming a ton of consumables.
Yeah,
but
there's a whole consumable cycle that you have to do for this
usually
fight.
when a raid starts to overgear the content, you start using fewer consumables. But we knew Loatheb, because of his mechanics, would likely continue to require consumables even after on farm status.
True.
When we're testing content internally, developers have cheat codes that let us spawn in potions, flasks, or whatever instantly, but players don't have such luxury. I don't love it, but after some internal debate, we decided that as the final boss of a Naxxramas wing, the requirement was okay. So funny thing,
I'll be honest. I know this is an unpopular sort of opinion. I like the use of consumables in raids. And Blizzard really started to move away from this literally in the patch after this raid came out, because they added like Guardian Elixir and they added the Battle Elixir system. So you can't stack potions anymore. They changed it to where the protection potions don't last for like 2 minutes and you can like double stack them. You know, like you would pre-pop a protection potion and, or sorry, not 2 minutes. Protection potions were like I think they would last 60 minutes, wouldn't they? Either way, it was always getting burned because you'd pre-pop it and then you'd have some and then you would pop another one. So I'm pretty sure it was 60. Anyway, I actually think it's okay. I know that's not a very popular opinion, but the reason why it's not popular, I understand, is because people don't like having to go spend a bunch of gold to raid and farm up a bunch of gold and do all that to raid. But that's kind of like whenever you talk about a game that encompasses like all aspects of it. And I think that's important when you're talking about making an RPG or an MMORPG. I think something that's very important is you have the whole game as part of the game. And you're not doing this like sort of like theme park sort of situation where you only do one thing. Like you only do arenas, you only raid, you only do Mythic Plus, you only level, you only do dungeons, you know? That type of stuff, I don't think it's like, I understand how there's certain people that only like a certain part of the game or a certain aspect of the game. Myself, being somewhat one of those players, right? Whenever we talk about Burning Crusade, like I love arenas. I can go and I can do Burning Crusade arenas all day. If I have good teammates, if I have the people that I want to play with, if I have nothing else going on in the world, I could just sit there and just spam arenas all day, every day, right? As long as the queues are there, which they usually are whenever I'm playing. But still, I'm kind of one of those type of players, but I understand for like good game design, and that's really what the core of Vanilla WoW is. Like, I think it's okay to have your character and like your player power be like 90%. Like your character can be like 90% of like as good as he could possibly be doing one thing. But in order to like take your character and be like the most maximum amount of power that you could have, I say 90% is like an arbitrary number, maybe 95, right? It doesn't matter, but just a little bit less than the best. To be the best of the best of the best, I think you have to be able to PvP and PvE to get all the rewards that you can and to push everything to the highest level. That's how you get the most out of your character. I think that's good design. Talking about playing the entire game. And I think that's part of being an RPG. Esfand, your hair looks glorious today. I'm glad you guys are paying attention. Thank you. That's the last part of this video.
Requirement was okay. So funny thing, after Loatheb was finished, I learned that Loatheb is an anagram for heal bot. Believe it or not, that was not intentional. I know, totally
what? There's no way. There's no way that wasn't on purpose. I thought that was an on purpose thing that they named him because of the design. I'll watch more of this guy's stuff in the future because I do have a phone.